Sentire Media.
Welcome to the Stop Italian Sounding podcast, uncovering authentic Italian food. I'm your host, Robert Campana, and join me as we delve into the rich heritage of genuine Italian food, exploring its legends, history, and traditions. Through important tips and insightful interviews with industry professionals, you'll gain a deeper understanding of authentic Italian food. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stop Italian Sounding show, uncovering authentic Italian food. So today's guest is Dr. Steve Mancini, and I was recently a guest on his podcast called the Italian Impact Podcast, and it really was a fantastic conversation that we had. So I said, I have to have him on my show as well. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. He's considered an expert in the field of cybersecurity with over 30 years in the field, and having published various journal articles, as well as speaking at conferences, events all over the world. He's also an international award-winning filmmaker as well. And his recent film, Fedeltà Soldier Prisoner, has been accepted into the film festival in 6 different countries, and in various cities also throughout the United States, and has won numerous awards, including Best Feature Documentary at the Dallas Movie Fest. This film is currently available on Amazon Prime, and I actually watched it a few weeks ago after we had our conversation, and I highly recommend it. So kudos to Steve and his team with that. In addition, Steve is the former co-host of several radio programs and podcasts in the Pittsburgh area, and is currently the host of the acclaimed Italian Impact podcast, which has so far been downloaded in over 25 countries around the world. And the Italian Impact podcast is also available on all major streaming services. So again, I encourage you to go check that out as well. And why not? You get to hear the episode that I was on. So that's a win-win situation, in my opinion. And lastly, Steve's passion for the Italian culture is well known. And in fact, he was recently appointed honorary consul by the Italian government for the Pittsburgh area. So, Steve, thank you so much for being here today. I truly appreciate your time. And if you could take a minute, of course, and kind of just talk about who you are and what got you to this point.
Well, Robert, first off, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that. And a quick little background about me. Like you said, I've been a cyber guy for decades. I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh, and at a very young age, I moved off. Lived overseas for a lot of years when I was in the military. And eventually, like all Pittsburghers, I made my way back home about 10 years ago. But in that time, it gave me the opportunity to meet a lot of folks all over the world, engage in a lot of different conferences, events in the field of cyber. And then when I came back, that sort of reignited my passion for the culture, because I was so distracted with all of the quote cyber stuff that, it's not until you come back and you say, I wonder what happened to so-and-so. Oh, they're dead. Oh, okay. Yeesh. Well, what happened to so-and-so? Oh, they're dead too. Well, what happened to so they're moved. Oh, that store closed. And at some point you say, wow, I think I missed a few things here. And so I decided to kind of take that not missing anything anymore and run with it. And that's why I started to kind of jump both feet into, the Italian American community here. And then one thing led to another. And the next thing you know, I'm on podcasts, radio shows, and making a film. And then before you know it, I'm appointed the honorary consul for the Italian government. So it was like, I went from, sure, I think I'm going to move back to Pittsburgh to holy cow, I can't leave now. I'm stuck. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing after another. And let me say, you're doing a lot of great things. So complimenti, kudos to what you're doing. And I want to talk a minute about your honorary consulate by the Italian government, and also about your film as well. So that's a big role, first of all, that you were appointed to. What exactly is that? What do you do? It's in the Pittsburgh area. So I'm sure you're inundated with a lot of different things.
So funny you say Pittsburgh area. Let's start there. It is called the Consolato Onorario d'Italia a Pittsburgh. So it's the honorary consulate in Pittsburgh. However, I have received calls from people as far away as New Jersey, as far north as Erie and Detroit, obviously a lot from Ohio, West Virginia, and even had a person drive up from Virginia to get his passport renewed with me.
Wow.
So I thought it was Pittsburgh, and I thought, well, this would be nice, help some folks in the local area. Wow. Let me just say that, because I jokingly say that, but in the same time, I don't jokingly say that, because first of all, I want to say this sincerely. I was humbled, and I don't use that word lightly, humbled to have been appointed this by the Italian government. There were a lot of people that wanted this position. And I think what they wanted, and look, I'll be honest, I think a lot of people say, oh, you're the honorary consul. It's a title. Sure. But if I take that title and $3, I get a cup of coffee. Okay, so you see what it gets me. But what it does to me, it's a lot of
Is it
work.
at least a good coffee?
It depends on where I buy it. But no, but what it got me though was think about what I want to do is I wanted to get involved in the community. So this is actually a lot of work, and I'll kind of talk about what that means. But what it did so far is it's got me meeting a lot of folks, and I'm talking to a lot of folks. In fact, I had a guest on my show a couple of weeks ago who I met through this just because we got to talking, and he just had some really interesting stories. And I was like, wow, that's kind of neat. I said, hey, would you like to be on my show? And he said, what show? Said, well, there's the popularity of it, but. But no, so I had him on the show, but like a really interesting guy, and that's exactly why I wanted to do was just to meet people and kind of help them out. Well, what the job entails now is the biggest thing that I do is biometrics for Italian passports. That's a big deal because I didn't realize how many people in the Pittsburgh slash surrounding areas needed to renew their Italian passports. There are a lot of people. I mean, I'm probably doing 15 and 20 a week. Keep in mind, this is a voluntary position. I get nothing but work out of it, but that's okay because, like I said, my ulterior motive was just to meet people. And so it really is giving me that awesome, and I mean that awesome experience to meet a lot of really nice, wonderful people. But the biggest thing I do is I help them with passports. I get asked, can you help me buy citizenship? Can you get, can you sign my visa? Can you help me with this? I can't do most of that stuff. I can do things like be a witness because I actually have stamps. So I can sign and stamp documents. Like if you need a witness from the consulate that says, hey, Joe Smith really signed this document, quasi notary, but not notary. Like say for something, like say you're transferring property in Italy, I can witness that you signed this document for something like that. So it's a lot of administrative work that I can do for them. I can't expedite appointments in Philadelphia. Stop asking me. Can't do it.
I was just gonna ask you what is the difference between your it's so between your area and the Philly consulate, because the Philadelphia consulate I guess is the next level
That's
up,
that's
or
the
how?
real consulate, and I kind
Okay,
of work for them. So
okay,
I support them with a lot of admin support. That instead of somebody driving 5 hours to do their passport, they can do it in Pittsburgh.
gotcha.
It helps both parties because then you'd have less appointments clouding up Philadelphia, and then of course it saves people a 5 hour trip from the Pittsburgh area to drive over to Philly.
So are there a lot of Italian Americans that have their Italian passport or are looking to get their passport and then they need to come and renew it and do specific things?
Crazy amounts. I mean, for real, I was floored the number of emails and calls I'm getting for, hey, I need to renew my passport. Hey, I need to renew my passport. They used to do visas in Pittsburgh, like student visas, but we don't do that anymore because it's a different biometrics that they do now for visas. So I can't help with the visas.
Right, right. So they have to go to Philly for that. Very interesting. Yeah, no, in fact, now you got me thinking if my Italian passport is up to date or not. So I think I have to go check that out after we have our
New
conversation.
biometrics, mail your paperwork to Philadelphia. In a few weeks, you get your passport back.
There you go. Or maybe I'll just make the trip up to Philly and do it in person, then go out for a good Italian lunch or a cafe after. In Philly, there are a lot of good things. I'm not sure about Pittsburgh. In fact, maybe you could tell me in Pittsburgh what's the Italian food scene look like?
Ooh, good question. So there's a huge depends. And here's where I say that. There are a lot of nice little mom and pop places that I do like.
I love the mom
That
and pop shops.
right there. Put the chain restaurants aside. Not Italian. Yeah, pasta with sauce is technically spaghetti, but it's not. It's not Italian. I think. I think the authentic places are slowly going away and be replaced, in my opinion, from what I can tell, and being replaced by these kind of fusion places.
Really?
And in a weird way, that's okay because I think there is this belief that it has to if the recipe doesn't stay this way, it's not authentic Italian food. It's
And
like
that's
I got a
always a
new
question. And no, you're right. And that's always a question that I that I asked, like, how do you innovate with Italian cuisine while respecting its tradition and history?
Right. But you got to ask yourself, what is tradition and history on some of these plates? Yeah, there are some plates that have been around for a while, but let's be honest, Italians didn't eat this way 150 years ago.
Exactly.
And I
That's right.
think people kind of don't realize it was a pretty poor country, and all of this wonderful stuff that you're eating just wasn't available in this kind of, en masse like this. So,
Exactly. Well, Italian cuisine was really born, I think, through Italian immigration in the United States and North America for that. Like, because you had regional cuisine. You still have regional cuisine now, but like when the Calabrese met people from Rome who met people from Milano, they didn't know specifically what this regional cuisine looked like. And now you're saying, oh, interesting. You eat that from Milan or risotto allo zafferano or whatever it is. So like they're sharing their regional cuisines in the United States, and that's where the concept of Italian cuisine was born. Because if you go to Italy, everybody will say, "No, questa è la cucina calabrese, questa è la cucina pugliese," whatever it may be, because there's so many regional variations, and that's what makes Italy such a very unique nation from a culinary point of view. You know?
well, and that's the whole point. When you say Italian food, it's like, what do you which Italian? And I think Italians have done a lot in the last 40, 50 years to quote, really push unification. And I know a lot of people that if you don't understand the history, you don't really get that. Um, but it wasn't Italy, but till about 150 years ago, and ish, plus or minus. So to think that overnight, oh, we're now one country. Okay, everyone, forget your dialects, your languages, forget your food types. We're going to be Italians. I'm like, that's not right. And even when you go to Italy, it's still very different where you go. And then if you keep in mind the small, not the province, but like the comunes, you've got towns in the mountains that do something a certain way, and you could travel 5 miles across the mountains. Hey, maybe you're still in Calabria, and they do it just a little different. Well, now imagine how much different they would do it, 500 miles north. So Italian food really depends when you're quote in Italy what they eat in that region. That's their version of Italian food. So
Absolutely, and I mean, you very rarely see like actually, I don't think I've ever seen Italy trattoria italiana. It's always a trattoria romana, trattoria, of the local place. So that's one definitely one point that I always try and make when I talk about the concept of Italian food. And then when even with my friends or when I'm out and people say, let's go to an Italian restaurant, I kind of cringe a little bit because like, what do you mean by an Italian restaurant? Maybe it's just me being my stick in the mud self, but
I'm just looking for some spaghetti and meatballs. Do you know a place?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's go to Abruzzo, spaghetti con le pallottine.
Yeah.
Spaghetti alla
Well,
chitarra.
well, I'll tell you what's funny because last year when I was filming, that was the first time I was in Milan, and I will tell you that the food that I ate up there was very different than what I had in the South. I mean, the risotto plates to me was the norm instead of the. That's not that they didn't eat pasta, but I'm telling you, they pulled out the risotto before they brought out the pasta as their carbs, whatever they're going to call it. I was kind of like, huh. I was sort of expecting a pasta dish, but that just showed that. I mean, I knew risotto was a dish in Italy, but I was really surprised. It's just little things like that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and also the concept of like the amount of food that you eat. I lived 1 year in Lombardia, near Milan, the province of Varese, and just like when you go out, the concept of the portions that you have are much smaller compared to that of the South for various reasons. That is, and also based on what they eat as well. I think of like the concept of the aperitivo or the apericena. You go out, you have a drink, and then you get a little stuzzichini, pickings, finger food, if you will, and it's just a small type of things, and eat slowly, of course, because everything's done slow. Maybe not as slow in the north, but as the south is,
Well, let me ask you
dragging
that
your
then.
feet.
When you were there, because one of the stereotypes here is everyone thinks, oh, when you go to an Italian food, you've got to gorge yourself till you can't eat anymore. Like the old Romans, where you're eating and eating and you go out and puke in the vomitorium and then come back and eat some more. I mean, I didn't see that when I was
No,
there at all.
no, unless you go to Zia's house. When you go to Zia's house, it's a different story because you're a guest.
Well,
But when you're
yeah,
out, yeah,
yeah,
but
but I
what
mean, even then, I feel like I remember going over to somebody's house, and they're an older couple, and even then, there were a lot of like the courses, but I just don't remember her just like
you're
eat mangia mangia. I'm
no,
like
no, you're right. The concept of like an abundance of food is totally different because number one, they eat slowly.
Right.
um, and they eat slowly, and therefore they eat a smaller amount because it fills them up quicker. You know, if you're consuming it slowly, you have that feeling of satietà. So say what's the word in English I'm looking for? Satiety. You know what I'm talking about? Satietà.
Satiated, is that the word?
Satiated. Yes, exactly. You're full.
And stop
Um,
American sounding, Robert.
exactly. I'm going to stop right now.
No, I love
um,
that, by the way.
oh
I
yeah,
not
no, it's
talk a lot. I said I love that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. No, you got to have fun every once in a while. Yeah, no, but that concept is just totally different in the north, really in Italy in general, compared to here. When you go to certain restaurants, not all. If you go to an authentic, I'll call it an Italian restaurant for namesake. Um, the real authentic ones owned by Italian chefs or Italian owners will try and mimic to a certain extent the real experience. But if you're having good quality food, a good quality pasta, for example, which I talked about the other day on Instagram, a good quality pasta will keep you full. You don't have to eat the entire pound of pasta. 80 grams, 90 grams is good enough. And I love pasta. I could eat the whole pound. Believe me, I used to eat the whole pound. Back in the day, I feel like it at least.
I'll
But
tell
yeah,
you
this
right now. I used
concept
to
is just
think
totally different.
it's not too long ago. In fact, we could even say maybe possibly even yesterday, where I may have eaten half a box of pasta by myself. Um, that's the American mindset,
That
though.
is the American mindset. But yeah, you just kind of have to cool down a little bit. You know, and in fact,
No, I'll just run an extra mile.
yeah, exactly. You tell yourself that, and you say, "No, it's always tomorrow. Sempre domani. Lo facciamo
Sempre
domani."
domani.
Anyway, a few minutes ago, you mentioned your film. I want to talk a minute about that. Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner. It's won a few awards. Could you first of all, tell us what it's about? What led you to creating this film? Anything and everything about it, because after we had this conversation a few weeks ago, I went to Amazon Prime and I downloaded it, I ordered it, and watched it start to end, and I loved it. There's so many things that I learned. So,
Awesome. Well, first of all, I sincerely mean this. Thank you very much.
of
I think
course,
it's a wonderful story. Listen, I'm not Marty Scorsese, and I get it, but this is one of those stories that, and I know this will sound funny to a lot of folks that are listening, that you almost feel like you were called to do. This I was introduced to this story probably close to 2 years ago now, and the gentleman that introduced me to the story has since passed along, and he had a passion for trying to preserve Italian American culture in the area, and Joe D'Andrea was his name. In fact, he was the honorary consulate decades ago, and that was kind of how I got introduced to the whole thing. And he was one of the individuals that actually recommended me and wrote a letter to the consulate, said he'd be a great guy. So I was very grateful to him. But I just remember him telling me this story about this chapel, and it was built by these Italian prisoners. And I'm thinking, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I have no idea what he's talking about. And so after he passed away back in, I want to say it was December of 23, I decided to kind of get on my high horse and just start doing some homework, started doing some outreach, and said, I'm going to do something on this. I've just had a passion for wanting to do a film. I've been in radio and podcasts. This was just something I wanted to do. And so I went out and did my homework on it, started talking to folks, and they really led me down a rabbit hole. So I was thinking there was this little building in Chambersburg, and I was going to take a camera crew out there, and we were going to film it, talk to a few folks, and then that would be the end of it. Then they're introducing me to, this association in Italy, and then they're telling me about all these family members that are still alive, and some of them are living in Chambersburg, and I'm like, whoa! And then they start sending me diaries and letters and photos, and I'm thinking, oh my God, did I bite off more than I can chew? So I coordinated all these trips out to Chambersburg to film. And then the association was called AMPIL, Associazione per la Memoria dei Prigionieri Italiani a Letterkenny.
ah,
It's sons and daughters of the prisoners that were kept at Letterkenny. And so I went out there in May, and they were located out of Milan, and he invites everybody from Italy. So now I'm meeting all these family members and got a film crew, and we're filming all these interviews. And I spent the summer, doing editing, and my goal was to get this thing out by September. And I mean, literally, like the day before we did the first premiere out in Chambersburg, we were still editing. That's, and I will tell you right now, I don't want to say there's things missing. Nothing major is missing from the story, but there was so much stuff I could have put in it. But I'm thinking this is a documentary.
I was going to
I
say, where
can't.
do you draw the line with that? You
Right,
probably had so much
exactly.
content that you had to,
And
you had to prioritize what was important
oh yeah,
in order
and
to accurately
again,
tell
there's
the
so many
story.
rabbit holes I could have gone down. So, but for the listeners, the story is, I don't want to say simple, but it's very straightforward. These Italian soldiers were fighting in mostly North Africa and Sicily. They surrendered. Think of battles like El Alamein where they lost, et cetera, et cetera. So they're surrendered. They're captured. Eventually, Italy surrenders, and but the prisoners were taken as prisoners. They were combatants against us. So, but now Italy surrendered, right? And so now, not only do they surrender, at some point they say, you know what, we want to join you because now they put a new government. So Mussolini's gone. They want to put a new government in charge. It's pro-West. See, Italy is not a natural enemy of the West. They're in. That's where there was a lot of conflict, and people don't understand this. The Italians weren't cowards in any way, shape, or form. They were conflicted. They weren't natural enemies to the U.S., to the British. That's not their natural enemy. People don't understand the concept of natural enemies. And so you have a dictator, fascist Mussolini wants to reinvent and he's firing people up. But then you've got other people going, this isn't right. So a lot of them, their hearts weren't necessarily in the war because they were torn. And in fact, one of the family members even mentions that. He's like, we didn't have an identity here because, by the end of the war, they're prisoners of both the Axis and the Allies. Because now, kind of get back to the story. So now they surrender in 43. 44, they're finally recognized as allies. And a lot of people don't know, even when the Germans, even before they surrendered, there were still partisan groups in Italy that were never on the side of the Germans. They never supported. They fought against the Germans. In fact, they
From
fought
day
the war.
one.
Right. And so this story kind of chronicles these 1,250 prisoners that were brought to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. There's an army base out there called Letterkenny Army Depot, and they were formed into what were called Italian service units. So their job was they were still prisoners, but they were treated as soldiers as well because Italy surrendered and was, it was recognized as an ally. And these guys had renounced all the fascism and all that crap.
Mhm.
And so they wanted to support the Allies, but we couldn't just let them go because they were taken as combatants. We were still at war. There were still some, Italians that were committed to the fascists. So you're like, I don't know what to do with these guys. So they kept them as soldier prisoners, treated them, fairly well, and allowed them to kind of form into these logistics service units that supported the Allies. So they would do things like maintenance, supply, et cetera, et cetera. But while they were here at Letterkenny, they would not only support the war effort, they did things like build facilities. And one of the things that they built was a small chapel. And the chapel is actually still there. And so when you see the documentary, you hear about the whole history of the base because the base came into existence at the start of the war. And you can actually see inside, you can see, inside of the chapel. Then you will hear the stories of the family members of historians and including the base commander, the current base commander, because they talk about all of this because it's a tremendous story when you hear it. And there's a lot of little tangents inside the story that they're just very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like you said before, I mean, it's literally was in your backyard. You had no clue that that even happened. So I mean, the amount of things there are to learn, about the Italian history, Italian American history, or in this case, the war is just. I mean, everything was brand new to me when I found out. So I was like glued. Just I love learning new things. You
And
know.
I'll tell you a funny thing. When we premiered this September 6th in Chambersburg, so huge shout out to Chambersburg, the actual historic society. And I forgot the bank. Oh God, I feel terrible. But they actually sponsored it and rented the town theater, so the Capitol Theater there in Chambersburg. By the way, which is a beautifully preserved historic theater. If you're anywhere near Chambersburg, go see the chapel. Go see the theater. It really is very pretty. It's one of those old theaters that they just don't make them like that anymore. But they've done a fantastic job of restoring it, preserving it. But over 300 people show up for the premiere of this thing. What was crazy was a lot of them were obviously from Chambersburg. And I was talking to them afterwards and like, I live in Chambersburg my whole life. I had no idea. They're like, I knew there were some Italians there. I knew there was something. But like, they
They
had
didn't
no
know
idea
what
the
it
whole
was.
story that was there. I mean, it was a tremendous story because imagine in your backyard, there's 1,250 prisoners being kept. Do all of these things War's over. They get repatriated. Some of them actually came back and married local girls.
I was going to say,
Um,
not. I don't. According to what I remember from your film, not all of them wanted to go back. Correct?
No, because they met local girls.
Right.
Because they were
Exactly.
allowed to go off base like on weekends. They were treated like I said they were, by 45, 40, 44, 45. The Italian it was pretty obvious. One, the war was over,
Right.
and two, the Italians weren't the problem. So they were allowed to like go off base. Some of them even had family members here because remember you had immigration before the war. So some of them had family members. So they were going in and out and kind of visiting people. There were some restrictions to that, but they were allowed to meet people. People would come visit them. And so some of them met local girls. Guys do what guys do, girls do what they do. But what happened was after the war, though, they all had to go back. And it took about 4 years before Italians were allowed to immigrate to the United States again. So we weren't allowed to come back for
Oh,
about
was it
4 years
4 years?
after the
I
war.
didn't
Right.
know. It was, wow.
And, but, some of them came back. Those girls that they met, they ended up marrying, settling down here. And there were even cases where the girls, because the men couldn't come back, the women went to Italy, married them, and then waited, and then they came back. So
Ah, okay. Wow. You
nice
talk
stories.
about dedication right there. No social media, no texting, nothing. You
In
can do it
fact,
the
one of
old-fashioned way.
in the documentary, you remember the story? The girl says they got on the Queen Mary and sailed over there.
It sounds Jesus.
Wow.
Exactly. That is a big one. I mean, I just think of my grandparents, for example, who came over. It was had to be in the 50s, I believe it was, just on a ship, of course, and then the family members left back in Italy and writing letters. They would get after a month, a new one would come in, and that was the communication. It's just I,
So
they survived, and they were able to make a good life.
I'll tell you two kind of quick, funny stories on that. One, so a few years ago, I kind of went down the hey, do I have living relatives in Italy? And this was during COVID. I mailed a letter, I want to say in June,
Mailed a
and
letter. I don't know the last time I mailed a letter.
I mailed 3 letters, and this was around June, I want to say of 2020. They were not received until March of 2021.
Poste Italiane.
So, but it was funny because all of a sudden I get this call on, I think it was WhatsApp, or actually it was a message from WhatsApp because I put my name and my contact
Yeah.
info, and it was in Italian. I said, "Well, this is I." There was something about it that said "not fraud," so I read it, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that is one of the people I emailed." And then shortly thereafter, I got an email from a different person who got life. And the next year, I blew my ass, and my family, about 15 of us went over there and met them.
That's
But
awesome. Where?
an
What
interesting
region? What part of Italy?
Calabria at that time. Yeah, we went
Calabria.
down to
Okay.
Calabria. But I tell you, but what was also interesting at the same time was when we went down there. Um, one of the relatives, an older relative, she was really like happy sad. She was so happy we came back. And she was telling us a story about how, when this would have been my great grandfather immigrated over here, he wrote one letter, but it wasn't too many years after he died. So it was one of those people don't, again, they don't appreciate what they have now. They
Right. No,
just don't.
exactly. We have to learn to appreciate what we have now.
Exactly.
It's very difficult to do that. I mean, it shouldn't be difficult, but unfortunately, it has become difficult.
And I would tell you, make an effort to find those people,
Yeah.
because as long as they don't think you're coming over to take the property, they will they will
It's life
love you.
changing. It's
Oh
you're
no, it
right.
is.
It's 100% life changing. I mean, I have a story similar to meeting, relatives over there. My mom's side, my grandfather's sister still lives over there, and till this day, I talk to them regularly. The other day, I just had a video chat with them and just to say hello. I was having a coffee break, and I said I'll give them a call. But it's life changing. I mean, you become that bridge between your Italian American family and your relatives that are still in Italy, and it's very enriching in multiple ways. It just kind of gives you it gives you purpose to your cultural identity. And I know we talked about cultural identity last time I was on your show, and it's just powerful. So I mean, what's your take on that?
I think that and I believe this in my heart. I believe that I don't want to call it some kind of genetic predisposition, but there is something that you feel just a little more fuller
You do.
because you feel like you've kind of come full circle. When she was when she was talking to us, she actually passed away like a month later. But she was telling us how she remembered her mother talking about, her uncle, or was it her brother? I can't remember if it was her brother or uncle, but how he came, to America, and her mother missed him and this and that. I mean, we were like the closure that she needed. And to me, it was like you felt like you reconnected with the past.
I totally hear you with that. I totally
Yeah,
hear you with that because I mean I could 100% relate going over and meeting my grandfather's sister, my aunt, and her just looking at me saying like you're you're my brother. It was her brother, my grandfather. You're my brother's grandson. Like this is we should have this relationship.
right.
Is and
It's not,
it's
and they're not that far removed. And I think that's something people think. Let's say it's a grandfather, a great grandfather. Chances are, again, unless they were an only child, there are just a good chance that at least one person, brother or sister, stayed behind.
Mhm. Yep.
And I hate to say it, like, to sound a little morbid, but if they weren't killed in the war and they got married, you have relatives there. There's a good probability they might not be in the same town. I get that because those towns are small, they're poor,
And also
but
the
the rec-
comune changed borders and this
right.
and that.
But the record keeping, number one, is the record keeping is fantastic in Italy. For all of the faults of the Italians, one thing they do
I was going to
well.
say, are you sarcastic with that, or is that actually
No, no, I mean that sincerely. I think
really?
the record keeping, that is the one thing they do well. That's why when people complain about the bureaucracy, like, for example,
They can
and I
keep the
hear,
records
oh,
since they're ancient Romans. I mean, they have so many of them.
exactly.
That's the
No,
reason.
exactly right. Well, I mean, I was able to to go all the way back to the 1700s. And the truth is, I probably could find earlier than that. I mean, he just sort of stopped.
Hmm.
But because I had a genealogist doing it for me. I'll bet you money I could have gone back further than that. I just, at some point,
Probably.
but I'll throw something else at you. Like, for example, the cittadinanza. I mean, I get a lot of calls, people bitching about this and that. Oops, sorry, I used the B word. But I
That's
mean,
okay.
it's like, look, I get it. The paperwork's a pain, but think what they're trying to do. Because what you're going to have to do when you get your citizenship, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, there's two parts. One is being recognized by the government that you're an Italian citizen, but you have to tie that back to the comune. So the comune has to register you, and you literally, it's like old school. You're in the books.
Yep.
Not many
Literally,
people
the
get
literal books.
right. And so when you go, if you could, I would encourage you to go back to the comune where your family members are from. Go to the town hall and see if they'll let you, go ask for a copy. There's literally a book, and they're going to open the book, blow off the dust, and it's going to be penned in there,
It's so
this
true.
information. So it's
That is
kind of
so
cool
true.
that they do
It
that.
is. It is really cool. When I lived, when I had my sabbatical year, I lived abroad. I had to change my residence from Colle Volturno, which is in Molise, all the way up to where I lived in Varese, and they had to they had to set fax or email whatever it was, but it was all handwritten. It was a photocopy of it, of course, but all I was like
Right.
very interesting. Like they rewrote everything, and it was just. But I mean, just the system
Those
and the
databases
process is
don't get
different.
hacked. The
Yeah, exactly.
Italians.
And you're in cybersecurity, so you know best.
Go back to paper, people.
That's right. Can't hack that. So true. So true. So so you've been to Italy a few times, I'm
Oh
assuming.
yeah, and I can't wait to
Absolutely.
go back. Yeah.
Me neither. Cannot wait. I mean, for multiple reasons, but food is definitely one of them. What is your? I mean, you're a proud Italian American, so food was probably a big part of you growing up. Also a big part of being there as well. So what was that? In you growing up? Did you grow up in Pittsburgh?
I did.
You do. Okay, so you're
Sono nato e sono cresciuto qui
we'll
a
say
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburghian. I'm not sure what it would be. Pittsburghian milk.
Yinzer,
A what?
because we all say yins for some reason. It's
Yins.
a
Interesting. Wow,
yins.
that's news to me.
I know. Just
So what was food like growing up in your household, and how has that changed when you went to Italy for the first time and experienced, like you mentioned, Milano at one point compared to that of Calabria?
So funny you say that because I grew up mostly with my grandmother, and my grandmother's side was Calabrian, but she would make Italian, quote, Italian food, but of course throw in the American meatloaf and stews and chilies and stuff like that, right? So it wasn't Italian every night. But I will tell you, I think back now, and I'll give you one perfect example. We used to call them pizza frites growing up, fried pizza. But what it was
Pizza
the
fritti.
dough, right? It was kind of like almost like a donut. And I remember her, frying them up, and I didn't think nothing of it. When I went back to the comune where she's from, they were literally making them, and I was like just blown away by that, and because that was truly proof of a no kidding authentic dish that got passed down directly to and from. And in
I love
fact, I
those.
remember, oh, I love it. But I remember when my grandmother was older and still alive, and it was one of those moments in life where you knew you needed to do something. But I remember I said, "Hey, the next time you make pizza frites," I actually traveled up. I wasn't living in Pittsburgh at the time. Let me know. I'm going to write the recipe down. And so she was making them, and I was literally writing down what she was doing. I still have that,
Oh wow.
but that
Do you
was
still
one of.
make them?
It's been a few years, but yeah, on a rare occasion, I will make them. It's a pain in the ass, but they're
Yeah, I
delicious.
know, but the result's good. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And it's these
I could
these
never get
hum.
them nice and round like she could, but they
I know you
taste
can
the
you
same.
can never you could try your best. They never quite come out as they should, or as they were when you grew up. Yes, these small humble recipes and simple things that are very representative of the comuni, the small towns throughout Italy. That like maybe pizza frita is different in different areas. You
Right.
know, the way you know it in your town in Calabria is different than what it could be even in another town in Calabria. Same thing. I'm just thinking off the top of my head of like carnival food. You know, the dolci carnevalis del carnevale, for example. I think of castagnoli or even chiacchiere. We call them cioffe. Or anyway, there's so many different names around. Um, but yeah, it's just the small humble recipes that you just mentioned that
They
also
go
give
the
you.
farthest, right?
I'm sorry.
They go the farthest. I
Yeah,
mean, I remember
exactly.
she used to make risotto, and sometimes it was obviously a little. Sometimes it was similar to what I had when I was over there. Sometimes it was different, but it was one of those things I didn't realize. Again, you brought. She did not immigrate here. She was born here, but what obviously she picked up those
It was
traditional
passed.
traits.
It
Right,
was passed down, and that
right,
kind of closes a circle when you say, "Oh, after all these
right.
generations, and you go back to that area in Italy and you meet your family, you're like, oh, well, we did A, B, C, and D growing up. Now we actually could see it firsthand.
Yeah,
So
that's
it
the
kind
aha
of
moment. Yep.
that's the aha moment. It kind of fortifies everything. So anyway, Steve, this was a fun conversation going down memory lane a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. I want to be respectful of your time. So how could people find you, follow your work? Of course, check out the film that you made.
Sure. Well, first off, the film is available on Amazon Prime. Again, it's called Fidelità, Soldier Prisoner. It's out there on Amazon Prime. You do not have to be a Prime member to enjoy it. So please watch. And as I always like to say, sharing is caring. It's a great story. Literally, it's a 99-cent rental. Obviously, I'm not trying to get rich. I just think after having met those families, I'm just so passionate about their story. So please check it out, share it. Let's, for the most important reason, keep these stories alive. This was going to die here in the States if people didn't hear about it. So Fidelta, Soldier Prisoner, please go check it out. And sharing is caring. If you want to see more about the projects I've got working on, I do have a website, Stephen Mancini Productions. Again, yeah, I've got some upcoming projects, God willing, this summer, right, Robert? Right,
I hope so.
Robert?
I hope so.
And also out there, you can go to ItalianImpactWeekly.com and you can link out to the podcast, Italian Impact Podcast. It is available on all streaming services. So just go out and look out Italian Impact and you'll find me out there. And, appreciate you tuning in to anything. I always say this, look, growing up here, this is not where I thought I would be. And so the fact that I am here and doing these things and meeting a lot of wonderful folks. Robert, you're on my list of just people I would not have met had it not been for this. And I am truly humbled and appreciative of that. And so
Same
anytime
thing
I
with
can
me as
talk to
well. I
folks,
feel the same exact way. I'm glad to have met
blessed.
you,
We're
and
just
because
blessed to be doing
podcast
what we're
was
doing.
never in my future,
Right.
but it's there
No, it's
now.
wonderful.
So,
Like I said,
oh
and
yeah,
we're sharing the culture and,
absolutely.
and people are just having and we're having a good time doing it. And that's all that matters. So, join us, folks. Please, tune in the Robert Show, my show. We're excited to just share it with you.
Well, thank you very much. Grazie mille.
Prego, prego, non ti preoccupare e non vedo l'ora di parlare di nuovo.
Assolutamente. Grazie. A presto.
Grazie, Robert.
Thank you for joining me on this journey through the stories of authentic Italian cuisine. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more insights and interviews. Also, feel free to reach out with your thoughts or questions on our social media channels at Stop Italian Sounding or on our website, stopitasounding.com. Grazie a tutti e alla prossima.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.